but we encourage you to ask as many questions as you have by using the Q&A box. If at any time you're having technical difficulties, head to the gear at the bottom of your screen, and there will be a help document to help troubleshoot any common issues you may encounter. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. Bill is a 20-year veteran of technical sales, with most recently a VP of Solutions at Mesmo. He has an SE teams at a wide variety of companies, including Apito, HP, sorry, Bill, if I mispronounced that, Mercury Interactive,
Okay.
IBI, we just practiced beforehand, didn't we? And Pyramid.
Right.
He began his career as a programmer in system administration before going to the dark side of technology vendors. He is also an author of Amazon best-selling business leadership book, Tech Sales Wasabi, and the first 6 habits of the highly effective sales engineering certification instructor. And with that, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate it. So big shout out to all of my friends, former colleagues, etc., from Aptio. So make sure that we get that right. And welcome everybody. Very, very excited to be here. Happy to be here. Love Demo Fest. Have loved doing these for the last couple of years, attending, having the chance to speak, and all that stuff. I try not to gush too much, but I really, really appreciate what Consensus has done for our profession and for this community. I think it's fantastic, and the lineup in this event is really incredible. So, like, I would name out people that I would recommend that you go talk to, but I think I would end up naming everybody. So I encourage you to see as many of these as you can, and take it all in, because there's just such a lineup of talent and thought leaders and all that kind of good stuff. So with that, let me get started on a little something I call sales engineer versus the brain. And let me start by saying that what I'm going to talk about here and present really focuses on your selling activity, and kind of when it's time for you to present, to demo, whatever that happens to be. That's really kind of, I think about the scope of what I'm thinking about in the talk and all of that. So this is about the part where you deliver your message to your prospect, to your customer, and you try to convince them of the worthiness of your solution, inspire them to make a change, and all of that kind of good stuff. It's interesting, when I started in this profession, I had the misguided notion that if I could win everybody over, I could win every deal, every presentation would be amazing if I just followed the right solution selling techniques and did all the right stuff, right? And if I lost or a demo didn't go well, it was because I had used the wrong technique or kind of done the wrong execution or something along those lines. But look, even after kind of doing demos and talking to my AE afterwards and executing, near flawlessly, as we might say, I still lost. We still lost. Like we still didn't get deals. The demo didn't resonate. Message didn't resonate. Prospects would claim that they didn't see a capability that they really wanted to see, that I was convinced that I had shown them, or that they looked at it and decided that it wasn't really valuable to them, when I knew that it was. And in that moment, in thinking through it, I kind of decided, you know what, it's not me, it's them. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that, because it's not like I'm thinking my prospects are idiots or they don't get it or they can't follow along or any of that. Because at the same time, I was reading a lot about how the brain works, what motivates people, psychology, sales psychology, the intersection of psychology and business and all of those kinds of things. And I realized that there were forces at work that would prevent me or sabotage my presentation, sabotage my ability to sell and close and all of that. So that's what this presentation is about. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned in all of that, and some of the stuff that has over the years kind of helped me overcome some of these forces and helped me win when I did win. So with that, let's first come to a fundamental realization. And that fundamental realization is that despite the fact that we've dedicated our lives to it and devoted our lives to it, the human brain is not purpose-built, designed and optimized to either sell software or buy software. Just not. It's not what it's for, really, at the end of the day. Not its primary function. So then the question is, what is its primary function? Well, instead of buying and selling software, it does a really, really good job of keeping us alive and identifying threats and helping us navigate this crazy world, right? So for example, as I click through these images, your brain is instantly reviewing, identifying, deciding what they are, trying to determine if there's a threat, if there's something that you need to do. You didn't really feel any strain or effort at that. I mean, maybe you're squinting a little bit because one of the images was small. You were trying to pick something out of the image, but really at the end of the day, like not really any effort involved. And even when you saw the saber-toothed tiger or you saw the tornado, you're like, I know what those things are. So no kind of work went into that. But now, and let me just pause for a moment. And actually, if you bear with me, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to reshare because I made a rookie mistake and I've got some audio that I want to make sure that you guys hear. So I'm going to try and redo this so that I can share the tab out. Because in order for you guys to get the actual audio, you've got to have the tab. And now I'm going to find the tab in this very long list of things. So while I'm doing that, let me just mention that I'm about to pull out a very awesome video that you're going to love. As soon as I can get it in here.
No worries, you're good, Bill. For anyone who is just joining us, we are taking Q&A. So just as a reminder, over in the right-hand area, there is a difference between the chat and the Q&A. So if you hit that Q&A box, I am here to help just guide those questions so we can get to Bill as they come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate it. Yeah, so you're doing exactly what a good AE would do, right? and helping me out and taking care of me while I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do?
No, you're good. Hey, screen sharing is one of the big parts of a virtual event, and sometimes we just need a hot second to make sure that we can present it in the way we want, and that will be appreciative for everyone.
Yeah, and so actually, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. It's okay. We're going to be able to, I think, press on without you all hearing the audio. So bear with me for a moment. I'm going to fire this back up.
Bill, we can make it as a follow-up. So for everyone watching, we will send the audio piece as a follow-up so that you can have that portion of the demonstration today.
Man, it bums me out so much too, because the videos are so good and I always love using video, but apparently I didn't realize that you can't actually share audio unless you're sharing a tab. And because I'm logged into it, I won't go into the huge explanation. Like, you guys are good. All right, here we go. So here we are. So without audio, I still think this will have the impact that it's supposed to. Okay, so as I was talking about, showed you a whole bunch of pictures, we went through a whole bunch of stuff, and your brain basically was able to look, catalog, no issues, no worries. Now, what happens though if I do this? Now, Maybe you saw the moonwalking bear. Maybe you didn't see the moonwalking bear. That's okay. The idea, though, or the notion of what happened is, as you saw this, as the video came up, as the question was posed, even as I screwed up and did my rookie mistake and broke the whole flow of the presentation, your brain changed and engaged in a very different way. And you probably even maybe felt a little bit of strain, and you're looking, and if you're like me, like maybe you got a little anxious, you're like, oh my God, can I identify the people in white? Am I going to miss a pass? I'm going to count whatever. And all of that. So very different fundamentally from what you had experienced before. So the point is, like, as we're going through this, in a different situation or in different circumstances, there are different, your brain kind of does different things, and there are different aspects of your brain. And it's the different aspects of the brain and what it does that we need to understand and look into in order for you to kind of understand what you're up against when these forces that I talk about and when you're presenting and doing all that stuff. So look, there are lots of psychology frameworks that explain this notion, and a lot of stuff that's been published on it. I happen to have attached myself to and become very fond of this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and the work of Daniel Kahneman, who, as a psychologist, got the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics in 2002. And look, if you've not read this book, I can't recommend it enough. It's thick and dense and full of kind of sciencey stuff, but at the same time, he writes it in a very conversational tone, so it's very easy for you to read and pick up, and all of those kinds of things. And really, what Kahneman and Tversky did, his partner, is they upended a whole bunch of thinking around how people make decisions and how that relates to economics and stuff that that economists and thought leaders had been holding on to for like over 250 years, but was clearly wrong. And we'll talk about that actually as we go along. But essentially, the way that Kahneman decides to frame things up is he talks about the fact that there are two systems in the brain. And oddly enough, he calls them System 1 and System 2. And it's the interaction of these systems that we'll talk about and will be helpful for you to understand. So first of all, System 1 is the fast thinker. So think about the title of the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. System 1 is fast. System 1 operates automatically. It operates unconsciously. Some people call this the lizard brain or the reptile brain. It's not really the lizard brain. It's not really the reptile brain, but that's kind of how it's often referred to. And it works without effort, and it works involuntarily. So I think the one thing that I want you to take away from this is that System 1 is always working, and you don't have a choice about that. So you're essentially at the mercy of your System 1. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because System 1 is the thing that keeps you alive, but it's always going to be engaged. And this is the thing that I want you to keep in mind as we, like I said, as we go along in this. System 2 is the slow part, the slow thinker. System 2 needs to be invoked, and System 2 is switched on by System 1. Some refer to this as the wizard brain. Like, this is your conscious. This is when you think about who you are and how you frame up how you think and all of those kinds of things. You're typically thinking about System 2. And the thing about System 2 is that System 2 requires lots of effort and energy to do its thing. And at the end of the day, System 2 is lazy. System 2 basically avoids having to do anything at all. And if it has its way, it'll sit and hide behind System 1 as much as it possibly can and not have to worry about anything. So what does this mean for us then as sales engineers and as we think about going in and having to present and all of that? Well, first of all, System 1 doesn't have to buy software. It doesn't. System 1 only cares about like what it needs to do to keep you alive. Is that thing going to kill me or not? It's not. Okay, done, and I'm moving on. System 2 buys the software. So you've got to figure out, how do I get past System 1 to get to System 1, to get System 2 invoked, to get my prospect to be in System 2 mode and not in System 1 mode? Well, Since system one is working automatically and system two doesn't really want to be bothered, system one will do everything that it can to classify what it sees. And if it sees something that is remotely similar to something else that it knows, it'll throw that new thing into that I already know this bucket and kind of move on, classifies it, and we go on, right? And this is essentially called cognitive ease, and it's the state that your brain likes to be in, like to be in cognitive ease, right? So let's think about, here's your prospect sitting on your Zoom meeting with their camera off, and they're watching you demo. They see the video heads, and they're hearing you to listen to your messaging and blah 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 and all that kind of good stuff. And you know what? It does. System one does a quick look and it sees your interface, and it's like, I've already seen something like that before. And then it basically shuts itself off and or doesn't bother to invoke system two. And your presentation or your demo has kind of little to no impact. So what do you need to do? You need to be able to create cognitive strain, meaning you need to get past system one and get system two invoked. You need to give system one something that it is not familiar with, something that is kind of so far detached from what it's used to that it stops and says, wait a minute, we have to evaluate this. Let's get system two engaged. And if you've ever taken any of the 6 Habits training from Chris White, or you've ever gone through Aslan Sales training, which I highly recommend, those guys are amazing. They talk about the notion of a disruptive truth, right? Telling something that is attached to or is true, but it seems so unbelievable or not familiar or remote to the prospect that it causes them to stop and go, okay, I'm paying attention now. I did some work with John Kerr in the past as well in Mastering Technical Sales. And John taught my pre-sales team at HP how to use a limbic at the beginning of a demo. So to tell a story or to bring something that the customer, prospect, the audience isn't expecting, so that it brings them into focus, it forces them to engage, it gets their system two going, and system one says, begrudgingly, like, man, all right, fine. Like I got to get things going. I got to get system two going so that we can pay attention. The thing is, system one has lots of tricks up its sleeve to prevent you from getting to system two. These things are called cognitive biases. These are the enemies that you face when you present your solution. These are the things that you need to overcome to ensure that you land your message and close your deal. And there are a bunch of them, and like there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of great material about cognitive bias, and highly recommend that you read up on it as much as you can, look into it. I'm going to talk about 3 of them today. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the halo effect, and most people have heard about the halo effect and know the halo effect and all that kind of stuff. It's really kind of where that whole notion of, like, you can't make your first impression is the most important, and all of that. So the notion with the halo effect bias is this: whatever the overall impression that system one has of you, and so now whatever the overall impression of your prospect system one, whatever that overall impression is, whatever they have of you, will automatically get applied to the perception of one of your specific attributes, even if that person doesn't know about that aspect of your life or what you do or anything like that. Whatever their overall impression of you is gets attached to the specific things that they don't necessarily know about. And so let's talk about an example. So you might know this guy. I was just talking about him. This is Chris White. Anybody that's ever had the opportunity to listen to him speak or a chance to be in his workshops or meet him, it's like you look at him and I mean, just look at his face, right? A huge smile, really nice guy, really warm and friendly and all that kind of stuff. And so instantly, system one, like you meet him and you're like, oh, this is a great guy. What a nice guy, great guy. You can't say enough nice things about him, right? Now, you really don't know then anything about him specifically, his habits, what he does with his life, all of those kinds of things. But if, say, for example, a friend of yours were to come to you and say, hey, I'm looking for people to donate to my charity. You said this Chris White guy's a really nice guy. Do you think he would donate to you? Think I could ask him? And you would instantly say, without even thinking about it, because system one would cut in and say, Chris White, really nice guy. Charity, donating. That's what nice guys do. 100%. Absolutely. Of course, Chris gives to charities. He's a very generous guy. And off you go on your way. Now, the truth of the matter is maybe Chris is a generous guy and maybe he does donate to charities. Or maybe Chris is just the nicest Ebenezer Scrooge you've ever met. You don't know. But because of the halo effect and this bias, system one just says, yep, nice guy, perfect, here we go. Like, yep, he's generous, he donates to charities. I know it. And you say it with a lot of authority, and you really believe it. So then, look, I think you can probably figure out at this point, this part is obvious. Like, at the end of the day, what does this really mean then to us as sales engineers and, and to selling and presenting and all of that? Obviously, you need to be kind of very mindful of your first impression. So in the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman says sequence matters. So as you think about how you apply this to your demo and some of the basic demo rules, like show the most impactful thing first and all of that. There's a lot of cool and good psychology behind that, because the halo effect increases the weight of first impressions. And this is the thing about this quote that really hit home for me. Sometimes to the point that subsequent information is mostly wasted. So think about all of those times where you like pulled an all-nighter, or you spent a bunch of extra time on a demo because you really wanted to craft it and make sure that it was amazing, and every click was going to be like fireworks and a celebration and all of that kind of stuff. And then think to yourself, like, man, did I even worry about what my first impression was? Do I even know? Did I have something in my teeth when I first talked to the prospect? Did I say something off? And then all of a sudden, all of that work is kind of gone by the wayside. So, like, the thing that I would drive home with you here, in addition to what I've kind of written on the slide that you can read, is this. Really think about and be mindful of when your first impression occurs. It's not the first time you click the demo. It's not when, the AE says, okay, and here's Bill to give us the demo. First impression has already happened at that point. It's probably maybe back to the discovery meeting that you did, hopefully, or the first meeting that you did to get to know the prospect with the AE. And you know what? It's the instant that the prospect came onto the Zoom meeting and saw you, right? And how you presented yourself. And, the fact that we're not face-to-face anymore, I've noticed, like, people kind of dial things down a little bit, right? I used to put a suit on when I would go and visit prospects, even if I didn't have a tie, before COVID. Would always make sure that if I was going into the office and wasn't going to see prospects, like, I was business casual. I had a button-down shirt on. I put myself together. I showered, all of those kinds of things. And I see SEs now, sometimes they've got a ball cap on, or they've got their Iron Maiden t-shirt on, or that kind of thing. And look, at the end of the day, depending on who you're presenting to, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But maybe it is. And maybe when you're, there's some VP of, IT ops or some CFO or whatever kind of sees you in your ball cap and your t-shirt, it's like, they can't help it but look and start to make automatic associations, because what is their system one doing? Oh, people that wear ball caps and t-shirts, like, they're really casual, they're not very businessy, maybe this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, he doesn't have credibility. All of those things kind of start to play out. So look, I'm not telling you got to wear a suit and tie and all of that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is, think about who you're going to enter into this virtual meeting with, if you're, if it is virtual, and I know most of them are, and think about the first impression you're going to make, because when the prospect sees you, like, that's the first impression, that's the switch or the click. And most of the time, it's not going to be like, this guy looks amazing. You just don't want it to be like, does this guy really know what he's talking about? That's what you want to avoid, because whatever that first impression is, it will carry through with you through the life of the demo. And even like afterwards, when your prospect is talking to their colleagues about, the demo that they saw, and somebody might say, well, did it do this, or does the solution do this? Because of the halo effect, if that first impression was positive, they might be like, Oh yeah, of course it does that. Like that thing was awesome. Like it doesn't even matter whether your prospect actually saw that or not. That's what they're going to say. And the reverse is going to be true as well. So hopefully that makes sense. And I didn't put anybody off about the ball cap that they wear in the demo or things like that. Like it's one of those things because this is how the brain works. And at the end of the day, right, there's not a heck of a lot you can do about it. Okay. So let me talk about the second bias that I want to talk about, and it's something called prospect theory. Prospect theory, this is the thing that actually got Daniel Kahneman his Nobel Prize. This bias focuses on and affects how people make decisions, how people perceive risk, how they evaluate something. And there are kind of three parts to this, right? And we'll talk about all three and we'll build this up as we go through this. So the first part is that an evaluation is always based on a starting point, like where this person is starting from. It's not an absolute. And so it's relative. The second is that it's also based on how much change you would be suggesting in them making this decision, and not change from the standpoint of, oh my God, I can't handle too much change, but like, oh, how much am I going to get? Is it a big gain? Is it a small gain? And there is diminishing sensitivity, kind of the smaller the gain or the smaller the profit might be. Right. So if you think about the first statement of like evaluation is based on a starting point, but understand where your prospect is starting from. Second, like how much am I potentially going to give them? Is it enough for them to actually get excited about it? And then third, and this is very often the most important thing in general, losses look larger than gains. And people are naturally loss averse, meaning even though my ROI may be millions of dollars, if there's a potential for me to feel a loss on something, well, all of a sudden that ROI isn't so shiny anymore. And and I'm now overly rotated or overly fixated on what am I potentially going to lose? And that loss overshadows like, any great thing that you might be talking about. And obviously becomes very frustrating as you're trying to tell or convince somebody of something. So let's do first a little baselining as we kind of get into prospect theory and how it works. So first of all, it's important that you think about utility and to not think about value. So I know, if you're good SEs, that's all you've been thinking about. Everything's about value. Got to make value statements. Got to be focused on value. Your AE is telling you like, man, stop talking about feature and function. Start talking about value. We got to bring value to the customer. All of those kinds of things. What do I mean by this? So value, as you would expect, it's the pile of money. It's the gain, it's the ROI, it's the time I'm giving you back, all of those kinds of things, right? It's this, but it's thinking of it as a scalar thing, as an absolute. Whereas utility is the level of satisfaction someone feels in acquiring something, in gaining your solution, right? So it's feel versus logic. And utility is that like, I don't care what it costs, I've got to have it kind of thing. And it's a hugely powerful influencer. And look, I can tell you there have been, times in my life where I look back and I'm like, wow, I paid a lot of money for something that I probably shouldn't have paid that money for, but it made me feel so good at the time. It's that splurge purchase because the utility, the feeling, the satisfaction that you're getting from it. Really at the end of the day, you look at your bank book and you're like, I don't really care what it's going to do to me. Like I have to have this thing. So let's kind of talk through and look at an example of this, and I want to get your brains working a little bit. So consider this what I'm going to call a gamble. I'm going to give you two options. Option one is that you've got a 50-50 chance of getting either $1 million or $5 million, or flip a coin. Heads, you get $1 million, tails, you get $5 million. Or I'm just going to give you $2.5 million. If I stop right there and leave it at that, there's a really good chance that you're just going to look at this and go, man, give me the 2.5 million. Guaranteed. I won't feel that bad about the 5 million because I never really had it to begin with. And this is kind of like your zero starting point. So if I'm starting with nothing and I'm given these options, like I'm probably going to take the 2.5 million and run. But now, let's say you're starting with 10 million. You probably still lean toward the 2.5 million, but you're going to pause and think like, you know, I got 10. 11's not bad, and why not take the chance to get to 5 because I already got the 10, you know, but maybe at the end of the day you just go, you know, I'll just take the 2.5. It's guaranteed. But now let's say you've got 100 million. Now what are you going to do? I would suggest to you, I mean, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be like, look, I got $100 million. Like, if I can't get the 5, it's not really that interesting to me. 1 million, 2.5 million, you know, 1%, 2%, really not. That doesn't get me excited. That 5 million though, man, I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to feel good about gambling and all of those kinds of things. So if you kind of deconstruct this and think about this, all of these things that I'm kind of talking about, like what am I starting with? What is the size of my game? How do I avoid loss? All of that stuff at interplay and at work. And it's happening almost instantly without you thinking about it. And it interprets it or it conveys itself as this feeling that you get when you're thinking about these choices and when you're doing them. Let's keep going. Let's switch it up a little bit because there's more to it. Let's say you know two people, Joe and Helen, and today both Joe and Helen have $5 million. That's pretty exciting. I got $5 million. It's awesome. I had $5 million right now. I'd be very happy about that. But if you take it in the context of yesterday, Helen had $1 million and Joe had 10, do they actually have the same excitement of having $5 million? They don't, right? Helen's ecstatic. Oh my God, I just, you know, got 5x my money, 500% gain. I'm so excited. It's amazing. I got $5 million. Like you know, dancing all the way to the bank, as they used to say in the olden days. Joe, on the other hand, probably doesn't even care about the $5 million. 5 million. I had 10. What's 5? How can I do this to myself? How can I let this happen? Like I'm an idiot. Like $5 million. Like, you know, hey, $5 million is great. Like you're set. Things are good. You don't have problems. Like money is taking care of a lot of things. But because of the reference point of where both of these folks came from, they actually might have very different feelings about it. Let's go one step further. And I'm going to ask you to engage your brain again. So now we're going to get a little system 2 action going on. All right. Let's say you have $1 million. Vision it. You got this nice little pile of $1 million right here, ready to go. If I give you a choice between having a 50% chance to win another million or to get 500K, sure thing, you know, 50% gain as opposed to a 50% chance to double your money. Which one are you going to do? Some of you, you know, you big risk takers or whatever that happens to be, like at the end of the day, you're like, oh my God, like, yeah, let's go for it. Most people are going to be like, just give me the 500K. Like I'm going to be happy with that. You know, anytime you get a 50% gain on your investment, you get pretty excited. Now let me flip it though and say, given a choice between a 50% chance to lose 500K or you're going to lose 250K for sure. Now what do you choose? So before the gamble seemed like, it's not, you know what, not really worth it. I want the money. Now you're like, I want to do anything that I possibly can to avoid losing my $1 million. So you know what? I'm going to flip the coin and take the 50-50 chance. I absolutely am, right? Like, and most people would, because that's what you want to do. Even though you would lose half your money versus I could still come away with 750K and that's not all bad at the end of the day. And some, you know, look, people are on a spectrum. There's going to be some ultra conservative people that are going to be like, man, I'm not going to take that chance. I know I have bad luck. I'm going to lose that 500K. Like here's the 250 and you're going to walk away with it. So now let's apply this to kind of what we do. And Phil Medina, thank you for the question. I very much appreciate it because considering that people are loss averse, wouldn't that make for an opportunity to use 100% absolutely. Let's talk about how we would potentially do that. And as I do that, let me give you a for instance, an example. And of course, I pull this out of the real world. So let's pretend that you're an SE for an analytics software company, and your software automatically consumes data and ingests it from lots of different places. It's got AI that makes amazing charts and graphs and answers questions. You can talk to it, all of those kinds of things, right? It's a data person's dream. At your prospect is a woman, Nancy. Nancy manages this very complicated spreadsheet for monthly financial reporting. It's a grind. The last 2 weeks of the month are like the hard weeks, and then she's got 2 weeks of break, and then she's like, it's time to get the monthly reporting done again. Her company's interested in automation, and you have followed, as the SE, you engaged, you've done the deal with the AE, like you followed your technical sales playbook to the T. You did discovery, great conversation with Nancy, all of Nancy's challenges. You asked her about all the things that she's struggling with, and you asked her, like, why are you struggling with that? And what doesn't that do? And, all that kind of stuff. Then you got to do a demo, and maybe you did a proof of concept, and you build an amazing sample dashboard with all the data. It meets all of the requirements. It showed them a couple of extra things that they didn't realize that they could do. The AE built an awesome, ROI model that shows a return within a year with time saved and money you're going to find in this flawed, process. Like if you're sitting in the forecast meeting and the regional sales manager says, "Hey, are you guys committing this deal?" Like you and the AE are both like, "Yeah, we're committing this. Like we just did an awesome job." Or did we? Maybe. Let's look at, I got two Nancys. Let's look at Nancy number one. This particular Nancy loves her spreadsheet. She spent lots of hours building clever formulas and macros, creating amazing charts and graphs. The senior directors that are part of this monthly financial reporting, like they remark very often on, Nancy produces the best charts. I love the stuff that she gives me for my slides. My QBRs are amazing because of what Nancy does. Anytime I ask her a question, like she's got the answer right away, always good to go. So Nancy's proud of her spreadsheet, and she gets a huge amount of satisfaction, utility from using it. Now, Nancy's probably not the one making the decision, right? Maybe it's the CFO, maybe it's there's a head of finance that manages this monthly reporting, and Nancy works for this head of finance, and it's the head of finance that has to make the decision. So you go and you present to the head of finance, and the head of finance, he kind of steps back and he's like, "Man, I know we said we wanted to do automation, but now the choice that I have to make is between a potential gain that I'm going to get from your software after I put a bunch of work into it, by the way, because I know I can't just turn it on and it goes. Like we're going to have to do configuration and get data in and all those kinds of things. And on top of that, what do I do with Nancy? Nancy's going to be angry. She's not going to be happy in her job anymore. Maybe I have to let Nancy go. Man, I don't want to have to fire somebody. I don't want to have to repurpose somebody. Like that's a lot of headache and work for me and all of that. And all of a sudden, the ROI that you presented and the great demo that you did and all the POC and all that stuff is like totally overshadowed by the loss, the downside that the economic buyer is feeling. And he kind of shrugs and goes, you know what? We'll find something else to automate. Let's not automate this. I don't want to create problems. And yes, I have 100% been caught in this kind of situation before, unfortunately, and caught because, well, I didn't really bother to ask Nancy about how she felt about the spreadsheet. Now, we can look at Nancy number two, and as you would expect, Nancy number two is going to be somebody who, like, maybe she inherited the spreadsheet. She looks at it as a lot of manual work. It's difficult to change. She doesn't understand it. It breaks all the time. She has to go back through and troubleshoot it and fix all these macros that she doesn't really get, and doesn't want to necessarily have to learn. When she gets asked a question, she's like, ugh, now I got to go back in and do all this extra work to get the answer. And sure, maybe at the end of the month when the monthly financial reporting activity is done, she gets a bunch of praise for it and all that, but she would much rather be doing something else. This is the Nancy that goes running in and says, like, yes, we need to buy this stuff. It's amazing. It's going to revolutionize everything, and isn't worried about like losing her job or people not thinking great things about her spreadsheet or any of those kinds of things. So at the end of the day, like, we typically think about value and winning and positivity and what am I going to help the prospect gain when when they get my solution. But what we rarely think about is like, what is this? Where are the downsides? What does the prospect potentially have to lose as they go at this, or what risks are they looking at where there is potential loss? And like, how do I deal with this, right? And the potential risks and the loss that they're thinking about is like, man, what if this thing doesn't work? What if people don't like it? What if, what if it ends up failing? What if I spend too much money on it? What if I lose my job for it? Like all of that kind of stuff. These are the things that we also have to keep in mind as our prospect is thinking about making the purchase, because any one of those things by itself could easily overshadow the gain that you're preaching to them and trying to sell them on. And so then you might be thinking to yourself, like, okay, what about that first Nancy? Like, how do I potentially win her over? So I would tell you, and when I finally came to my senses and figured out, like, hey, I really kind of I need to get to know a person and kind of how they feel about the current solution and all of that, because they could torpedo things. What I realized is, if I can make that first Nancy who loves her spreadsheet realize that with my software, she can be an even bigger hero. If I can allow her to be regarded as better or more, or really look at it and have her think about it as like her solution, and she's bringing it and essentially replace that spreadsheet in her eyes with like, oh, now I can do more, and I've got the latest technology and all those kinds of things. Now what I've done is I've mitigated and neutralized that potential loss, and I've won her over. And now we can kind of go forward, and now I've got an opportunity. I've shown tremendous amount of utility. I made the loss go away, and I've got a better shot now at actually winning. So, Katie, I appreciate the question, by the way, about how you prepare to set the right first impression if your audience is unknown. Man, it's a great question. I don't necessarily have any magic answers other than, like, if I've never met these people before, if I don't know kind of who's coming on, I might think about, like, what kind of company is it? It's a financial services company. Financial services company tends to be conservative, so I might dress conservatively to kind of think about how I would talk conservatively, etc. Am I talking to a high tech company? High tech companies tend to be not conservative, very casual, and are actually kind of sometimes put off by people who come that are too formal or too conservative. And so, I make that adjustment. I'm going to use whatever cues I've got, and at the end of the day, maybe not kind of stretch to one extreme or the other, and then pray that my smile and my niceness and my positive attitude, which you should always have, like, wins the day and helps me overcome and make that great first impression, so I get a good halo effect going. So let's now kind of talk about, not kind of, let's now talk about the last bias that I wanted to mention, and this is a bias called theory-induced blindness. And theory-induced blindness is a bias that Daniel Kahneman actually came up with while he was doing his work around prospect theory. So prospect theory was Daniel Kahneman's answer to a thing called utility theory, which is where this notion of utility comes from, actually. Utility theory that was proposed by a Swiss person, Daniel Bernoulli, like in the 1700s, so a couple hundred years ago. And when Daniel Kahneman and his partner were reviewing and thinking about how people make decisions and the psychology of making decisions, and they're looking at utility theory and Bernoulli, they found some kind of like really obvious incorrect hypotheses and things that were fundamentally wrong with the way that Bernoulli was approaching this, that hadn't really been thought about, or nobody had really questioned. And so, when he was approached and people said, well, like, this is amazing. Like, why has this never been questioned before? Kahneman's only response was like, look, it's funny, like lots of academics, because they're academic, kind of have this theory induced blindness. And it's like, once they've accepted a theory and attached to it, and they've used it as a tool, and maybe they've defined their work around it and things like that, it becomes very difficult to notice its flaws, and people become very attached to it. And again, this is system one, system two saying like, man, I don't want to be engaged. And system one being like, look, this thing's been working for us. So you know what, I'm going to, any flaws that you're going to mention, I'm going to explain away as one-offs or exceptions or all of those kinds of things. So at the end of the day, disbelieving is hard work. Getting somebody to disbelieve, and it's why, if any of you, have heard like, man, we need to avoid the rip and replace. This is why this rip and replace is hard, because when an organization, when your prospect is particularly attached to something, even if there are things about it that they don't like, and you're suggesting that they completely redo it, like that just seems like a little too much. And system one kind of takes over and says like, oh, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Like, ignore this and like, let's move on, because system two doesn't want to have to bother with it, and it gets easily tired. So I thought it would be interesting. Like, let's talk about some of these, some theories that have been around that lasted for a long time that we look at now that are completely preposterous, but like people actually attach themselves to, and people lost their lives when they questioned it, right? So things like, hey, the earth is flat, or everything is made up of earth and air and fire and water. Like, these are the four elements that make up all things. Or even as early as or as not long ago as 150 years or so ago, when cars were first built. And the notion was like, oh, that car is just a toy for rich people. It'll never be practical. It will, most people won't ever use them. They'll never replace horses and all of that. Or something as simple as like, man wasn't meant to fly. All of these kinds of things, like, or like, hey, even recently, like the atom is the smallest particle. All of these things people were attached to for very long periods of time, and even when these things were questioned, held on to those beliefs really strongly. So how do you overcome that stuff? Well, there's a psychologist, Rachel Linton, who subscriber to a lot of Kahneman stuff, and looks at behavioral economics and decision making and things like that. And she said, look, an educated outsider asking seemingly dumb questions can contribute to a leap forward in understanding. And I love this, because really what she's saying is this: like, when you go in and you want to go head to head with the prospect who's convinced that, like, they're kind of attached to their thing, but they're considering other stuff. When you go head to head with them like that, chances are they're going to dig in even more. Like, they don't necessarily want to be proved wrong. But when you take the approach of like, hey, you know what, like, I don't know your business, so help me understand it. Why this? What about that? But what about this? And you kind of take that, hey, I'm just a caveman that was unfrozen. I don't know your crazy technological ways, or things like that. It's not aggressive. It's it's not frontal, and you actually cause people now to start thinking about what they're doing as they're answering you. And a lot of times as they are doing that and it clicks, it's like, oh yeah, maybe I am kind of, I'm down the wrong path, or maybe I am thinking of the wrong thing, or maybe we do need to actually rethink this. And I always think like that, like, this is a great thing for the AE to do, not a great thing necessarily for the SE to do, right? Because we're coming with the solution and we have the expertise and all of that, but the AE is considered kind of the not expert, and it's extremely powerful when the AE says, yeah, but help me understand, or I don't, I don't get it, so maybe you could help me understand this. People tend to kind of lean in and like, oh, let me help the dumb AE figure out what this is, and then all of a sudden they're like, as they're talking, their system too has to engage because they've actually never had to explain it before because they've just been going along thinking things are fine. But what else do we do? And what can we do then as sales engineers in overcoming these biases? So there's three things that I kind of want to summarize on as we're winding up here. First of all, I want you to think about focusing on the human. You can't create cognitive strain in somebody unless you know this person enough to know kind of where they're coming from and how their system one has been programmed, right? Because system one programs itself based on the things that you've been exposed to, based on the things it does, etc. So when you focus it first on the prospect, the person that you're engaging with, and not the company, not necessarily their challenges, all of those kinds of things, you get to understand them. Not only you get to understand them better, but naturally what they're challenged with or what they're struggling with will present itself. So focusing on the human and then making sure that you understand where their system one is coming from so that you can then counteract and get to the system two, like that would be the first thing that I would tell you. The second thing might be heresy. And I'm going to ask you like to put aside your theory-induced blindness. But I'm going to tell you, like, don't let good discovery ruin a good demo. And I would even say to you further, like, don't let the hour or hours that you spent doing discovery get in the way of a good demo. Look, discovery is important. Not denying that at all. But my caution is that you think of it like a step in the sales process or a demo prerequisite or any of those kinds of things, because it's not. It's very easy when you do discovery, especially if you do a lot of discovery, to get caught up in the discovery itself. And man, I got to tick off all of these challenges and I got to talk to all of these things and forget the fact that you're actually presenting to a human being. You're not presenting to the challenges. You're not presenting to the company. You're presenting to the human. And I was poignantly reminded of this in one of the 6 habits. So the 6 habits certification program, we do a call every week, and it's open to everybody in the program. And we just talk about things like this, techniques, how to employ the 6 habits, etc. We were talking about, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about. I think we were talking about like, how do you demo if you haven't done discovery? And Karen Riddle from Seismic was on, and she said, you need to be conversationally competent with your platform. And the minute she said it, I was like, man, like 100%, I hardcore believe that. And what she was talking about was like, she's like, look, you shouldn't be so kind of caught up in like a demo path and a demo script that you can't sit down and have a conversation with somebody and like in the context of that conversation, do the demo and let the demo and the conversation kind of flow together naturally as they would. So I would tell you, like, look, of course you have to do discovery because that's the part of the first one. Like that's getting to know the human and getting to know the people that you're going to be focused on and working with. And then get yourself conversationally competent in the platform so that when you do demo, it's not necessarily this formal, like, man, I got to demo these 5 things in order to win the deal. It's, I need to create huge utility with this person. I need to get them feeling really good about my solution. And I'm going to do that in the context of talking to them about the challenges that they shared with me and how my solution can potentially do it. So, at the end of the day, maybe we're talking about the same thing, but I think it's the way that you think about it and flipping the way that you think about it that becomes really important. And then finally, look, I want to repeat this because I think it's really important. I know your AEs and your sales leaders are talking about, hey man, got to sell value. Don't click the clicks. Don't just talk about features and functions. It's not speeds and feeds. You got to talk about value. It is. When you hear that though, just translate it in your head like, yeah, but I really need to talk about utility because it's how a customer feels about the solution that will always trump the financials. The utility of whatever you're proposing has to overcome the desire to do nothing. And value won't do that. if somebody doesn't necessarily feel great about your solution, all of the ROI that you would talk to them about doesn't matter and goes away if they're not feeling good about it. And I would tell you, I absolutely have experiences in my SE career where I was selling a solution against a competitor that was incumbent, had more capability that aligned to what I learned in discovery, and was less money. But the prospect still chose us because of the relationship that we created with them and the fact that they felt really good about getting our solution. And the incumbent, kind of walked in like, hey, we're the incumbent. And of course, you're going to want to buy us for this to solve these particular problems and all of that. They tried to sell on value. We sold on utility and we won. And I believe when you sell on utility, you actually 100% will win every time. And now, man, I wanted to end on this huge finale of this amazing movie clip. But since the audio is not working, I'm going to pause the movie clip and I'm going to tell you, go see a movie or rent them, like go see. Geez, I'm so old. Rent a movie. It's streaming. I think it's on Prime. I think it's on Netflix. But go see a movie called it's called The Guilt Trip. Stars Barbara Streisand. And I'll tell you, it's one of the best kind of sales and sales education movies that you could ever watch. And when you watch it, it's not a really long movie. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the best example of creating cognitive strain that I could ever think of. And Braxton Johnson, I see your question there. And I know that you know what I'm talking about when I say you got to drink your cleaner. And so with that, that's a wrap for me, Ashley.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. We did have one question from Marcel. She said, Bill, as you mentioned, slow thinking, fast thinking. Could these cognitive processes empower sales engineers to tailor their approach effectively to different customer personalities and decision-making styles? In other words, could prospects be categorized in slow or fast thinking?
So interesting question, Marcel. And I would tell you probably yes. But I think what I really want to make sure that you take away from this and not miss is the point that every prospect that you talk to has a fast thinking part of their brain and a slow thinking part of their brain. And the fast thinking part of their brain works all the time automatically without them having any kind of conscious thought. And that's the thing that you need to overcome. In terms of people being fast and slow thinkers, like 100%, there are lots of personalities that I would say, like, you can categorize people that don't need a lot of time to make a decision and go quickly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are people that take a lot of time to make a decision and you have to walk them through it and be patient and hold their hand and all of those kinds of things. So yes, you could categorize people as fast thinkers and slow thinkers. I would just encourage you, like, keep in mind that even the slow thinkers have a fast part of their brain. They've got a system one that you still have to overcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. If you'll let me share my screen, I'm just going to give us a couple seconds of wrap up here. And thank you again, Bill, for everything you did. Just as a quick reminder, as we're wrapping up the session, we are excited to bring Demo Fest X back to the roads. So if you have not yet, please go and register for our events in London and New York. We had a great time back in February in San Francisco. You can either do this at demofest.com or you can hit the links in the doc tab, just as a quick reminder. And then finally, I just want to let you know that we will be seeing you in the next, you'll go automatically or, and we'll cut off.
Wow, I took a lot more time than I thought I was going to. Sorry about that.
No, you're great. You did great.
Oh, wow.
Okay. No, I think you did fantastic. How'd you feel about it?
You know what? Other than, like, my God, I totally missed the whole, like, you can't listen to the audio unless you're sharing a tab. Like, that part bummed me out. Oh, you got pulled into something else. All right. All good.
No, I'm still here, Bill. I just want to make sure I kicked the other viewers out before you answered that.
I got you. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah. So other than that, like, I think it went really well. So I was happy with everything else, but the miss on the video, no big deal.
Yeah, no, it was great. I felt like we got some good questions too. So thank you so much for all the time and effort you put into this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We will be sending out some recordings on Thursday after this. I'll ask Sammy though if it's possible. I think in our recordings
to cut out the embarrassing part of me trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing.
Well, and
that would be good.
It's interesting that your session was about what it was about, because I was sitting there and I was like, I legitimately just asked you how to say Aptio, and then I literally said it wrong. And I was thinking, I looked at it and immediately it was like out of my head. And I thought, really?
System 1 did its thing. Yep.
And so as you were
That's
talking,
awesome. I love that.
I almost was like, it almost needs to be the example versus the joke of the mess up. But I thought about it as you were talking. So I learned a few things throughout your session too. So again, thank you so much. It was great. But that was
pleasure.
funny. I was thinking, of course I just asked. It was totally fine. And then as soon as I looked at the word, like legitimately that ease mind versus like my like systematic mind immediately like left.
That's awesome. I love it.
Like,
well,
okay.
good luck with the rest of it. I hope it goes really well. And I'm going to go catch some sessions now. All right.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks,
Awesome.
Phil.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks.